Information fueled,
opinion driven. This is Nashville's Morning News with Dan Mandis.
And so, my fellow Americans,
we talk news.
7:06, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN, along with Joan Jones, Johnny B. I'm Dan Mandis. Indeed, how are you, friends? It is Tuesday, November 19th. Matthew Hurtt is joining us on the Newsmaker Hotline. Matthew, always great to have you on. Let's get right to it. So, President-elect Donald Trump's cabinet picks, the most controversial one, I think, obviously, is Matt Gaetz. Now, I don't know if you were listening in the previous hour from where you are. I believe you're still in Arlington this morning. But, you know, these are allegations against Matt Gaetz. CNN is all over this. And, friends, if you're just joining us, there are allegations that he had, you know, sex with a woman, paid for sex, prostitute. Another one supposedly was 17 years old. All of these scurrilous accusations. But these accusations, Matthew, have been around since 2017. And so I would have just thought that they would put up or shut up.
You're absolutely right, Dan. These accusations have been around. What I can say is here's what we know about the process. Congressman Matt Gaetz has resigned his position. And what that effectively does is it ends any ethics investigation from the House on these allegations. And in the timeline, what we see is Gaetz was elected to another term. So while he currently does not serve in the House, he resigned immediately last week, he could be sworn in again early next year, whenever they swear members of the House in, I think January 3rd or so. And so what this has effectively done is it's a process move where the House Ethics Committee stops the investigation altogether, and over the course of the next several weeks, as we head into December, if it becomes clear that Gaetz is not going to make it through this process, he could essentially return to his House seat with very few consequences. I'm not sure how this is going to play out. This is one of the nominations I think would be the toughest to move through the Senate. Yep. But just from a process standpoint, a little bit of insider D.C. stuff going on here where the ethics investigation is stopped. That doesn't mean the conversation clearly on CNN has not stopped.
Well, and Matthew, if I may, Democrats are still calling for that report to be released.
Yeah, and that is, I would say, that's probably in violation of what House Ethics does.
Well, they don't
and
care.
it also stops it for for this term. And so if those ethics complaints came through in this term, they have stopped. And let's say Matt Gaetz doesn't make it into the administration and he returns to the House in January, there would have to be something that would restart that investigation, some allegation that would restart it. But this is certainly an effort to smear this guy.
It's the Brett Kavanaugh treatment.
It certainly is. And between Brett Kavanaugh and Matt Gaetz, there could be a varying degree of legitimacy to these allegations, and this is just another effort to delay who Trump wants in these roles. All
right, so what is your thought of the recess appointments versus going through the confirmation hearings? My worry is that the confirmation hearings, we all know what happened in Trump's first term, where he was not able to hit the ground running because his confirmation hearings took forever. And I believe that they were deliberately slow-walked. And so I understand why he wants to utilize the recess appointments, understanding that it is controversial.
The incoming Trump administration is light years ahead of where they were in 2016. That is very encouraging that they have fully explored the opportunities to hit the ground running. This is a president who knows he only has 4 years. Realistically, he may only have 2 years. If he gets some of these efforts with Elon Musk and others, would likely be a shock to the system to D.C., which could play out in the electorate in the midterms. The thing about recess appointments, though, is if you are a recess appointee, you actually don't get a salary until you are confirmed by the Senate, and your recess appointment lasts only through that session of the legislature. So it would only last through 2026, midway through President Trump's term here.
And then they could, one of two options, I talked about this the other day, one of two options. He can either try to recess, confirm them again, or they would eventually have to go through those confirmation hearings. Do you think that Trump has enough of a hold on the Republican Party that, and specifically, obviously in the Senate, where Gates, even though there's some Republicans that have some misgivings about Gates, they would go ahead and give Trump the AG that he wants?
Well, you and I talked about this last week with the Trump administration in the sense that the Rick Scott vote was a test vote. And so I think that a lot of times the party in power in the presidency, the members of the party in the Senate tend to give deference to the individual, to the party leader, essentially. But there may be some senators who are in really tough races in 2026 who may pump the brakes, who say, I'm going to be the check and balance on a Trump administration in a state like Maine or something like that could cause a little bit of a hiccup. You know, they've got Republicans that have 53 seats, so you can afford to lose 3 of those before the vice president has to step in and cast a tie-breaking vote. And so what may end up happening is you see a little bit of horse trading where one senator or 2 senators don't vote for one of the nominees and 2 other senators don't vote for another nominee, where they still essentially have a functional majority to get these nominees across the finish line.
So what do you think of Matt Gaetz as AG? I mean, I've gone through all the arguments. I think Trump needs somebody in there who is a loyalist, and I'll go ahead and say it. The left seems to think that, you know, calling these folks loyalists is some sort of a slight. I understand exactly what Donald Trump is doing. He does have a mandate to do the things that he was voted in to do, and so he doesn't want to have to deal with a lot of what happened in 2016. When he had his 4 years and he was hamstrung at every turn by the various agencies. And so he basically wants to put people in there so that he doesn't have to worry about it. He can focus on deporting millions of illegal aliens.
Well, this, Dan, is where your listeners are going to text into the super text line and say I'm an establishment squish. There are plenty of state attorneys general. In Virginia, we have Jason Miyares, who just announced his reelection. Next year, we have elections in 2025 in Virginia. There are plenty of attorneys general who have carried out the chief law enforcement responsibilities of their state, who are also Trump loyalists or hardcore America First people. So I think there's an entire portfolio of people who are probably more qualified, and so I'm a little perplexed of all of the announced nominees so far. This one is the one that's the most perplexing to me because there is such a deep bench in states across the country where there are competent, qualified, and loyal attorneys general who could carry out the will of the administration.
Do you think this is a head fake? So in other words, if they don't approve Matt Gaetz, well then they've got to approve the next guy, and that next guy is actually the real candidate?
Cynical insider DC me feels exactly that way. Well, let's throw out Matt Gaetz, see what happens, stop an ethics investigation in the House, have him return to the House in January, and then nominate the real Attorney General candidate. That's the cynical insider DC version of it.
Yeah, but let's face it, Trump is a smart guy, and he knows how to work the system now, and he's got some smart people around him. So I think that, personally speaking, I think that may be part of the equation here. And Matthew, I've got to ask you about this.
Another closely contested election now comes to an end. To my Republican colleagues, I offer a word of caution in good faith. Take care not to misread the will of the people, and do not abandon the need for bipartisanship.
Kind of weird that Chuck Schumer is asking for bipartisanship suddenly now that he's in the minority.
Yeah, this is political gamesmanship by Chuck Schumer, who, of all the states, I mean, New York had the most shocking trend toward Donald Trump. There are lots of opportunities. If Lee Zeldin came close in the gubernatorial race a few years ago in New York, the New York Republicans actually have a lot of opportunity not only to take back seats in their state legislature, but also to build a bench of people who could take on somebody like Chuck Schumer in New York. Donald Trump in this election has changed the map. New Jersey was closer than Virginia. There are a lot more places where Republicans can play to win in the election than there were 4 years ago or 8 years ago. And this is where Republicans on the ground, people like me and state parties, should really pick up and do the work to continue toward the midterm election and toward the next presidential election. This is a tremendous opportunity. Chuck Schumer sees the writing on the wall. He wants to be magnanimous and say, oh, we have to play the D.C. game. And I hope that Republicans take that with a grain of salt. Chuck Schumer is one of the biggest partisan games players in D.C., and we should not listen to him. Yeah.
Daily Mail reporting, we're reporting as well now that Ukraine has now fired those first U.S.-made missiles into Russia. This was a big topic of conversation that I had yesterday. Ukraine not wasting any time in utilizing these. Vladimir Putin has come out and said this is an act of war, not by Ukraine, but by the United States. Is Biden trying to crap in the living room before he leaves?
You know, I've had a friend pass in service in Ukraine over the last few months, and I'm of the age where many of my friends joined the global war on terror. I think J.D. Vance is an excellent representation of this, of a generation who is exhausted by war, and it is very concerning that in the last days of the Biden administration, he would essentially give a blank check to do whatever it takes, quote unquote, in Ukraine. And I'm just very concerned about it. This is, we've got fathers and mothers with young men and young women of service age. And do we want to send them to another battlefield? And this is something I think that our leaders and that Donald Trump has he's got good instincts on some of these foreign policy matters. And I just hope that he's able to get in there and cooler heads in this regard will prevail, and we don't have a hot war with a lot of American men and women on the ground in Ukraine.
Well, the crazy thing is Donald Trump, one of the things he ran on, I said this yesterday, was de-escalation. So what does Joe Biden do on the way out? He escalates it. It's the craziest damn thing. Real quickly, layoffs at the DNC. I'm sure you've heard about it. You live in Virginia. You live kind of sort of close to the swamp. You work in the swamp. So DNC announcing now with no notice whatsoever that the Democrat National Committee, they're having to now lay people off. And this just goes right back to Kamala Harris had $1 billion and she left the party with negative $20 million. And so what happened to the DNC?
In my time in politics, this has happened to Republicans as well. I think that the biggest shock was that the unionized DNC staff didn't see it coming. When you win elections, you get to stick around. When you lose elections, and when you lose elections by a margin this big, you don't get to stick around. As someone who has worked on losing campaigns and who knew it was losing before the election, you start to look for other opportunities. The thing about professional campaign hacks is that they will wind up at an association, or they'll wind up at a think tank, or they'll wind up on a cycle, an election cycle in 2025 or 2026. But it'll force them to get out. James Carville said it, I think, really well last week or the week before, where he said, get out into the real world and actually do something.
There you go.
Folks, and this is why I leave D.C. as often as I can, because it's not the real world here. And so it's a tremendous opportunity. Every setback is an opportunity. And as somebody who teaches people how to get jobs at Leadership Institute through our careers team, when you get fired, when you have an unexpected, you're made available to the industry, you have an opportunity to go and learn from that and build on it and come back in some other better capacity.
All right, Matthew, I've got 45 seconds. Real quick, your thoughts on Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski going to Mar-a-Lago.
Well, this was hilarious. I watch, when I watch cable news, I watch MSNBC, so your listeners don't have to. And they are the reasonable ones, I guess, on MSNBC. This is going to be a long 4 years for MSNBC and for CNN. And I think it was okay. Joe Scarborough at one time used to be a Republican member of Congress. Mika Brzezinski, as she said in her little monologue, comes from a family that brings people together. I think that they know the political reality is Donald Trump will be in the White House. Republicans hold both chambers for at least 2 years. And if they don't play ball, then it's gonna hurt them. And the flip side is it is beneficial to Donald Trump to say, welcome back, and let me do an interview, because somewhere there's going to be a viewer who says, you know what, he's not that weird, he's not that bad, and some of these policies will help the bottom line, will help my checkbook, and will help community safety. So they do what they had to do, and I think it's an opportunity to continue the conversation where Trump has the upper hand to talk about what he wants to accomplish for the next 4 years.
All right, Matthew, real quick, how can people find you on Twitter?
I'm on Twitter at Matthew Hurtt, MattheHewHurt.